Yeah, yeah, yeah. Welcome to Beyond the Block, everything crypto. Welcome to Beyond the Block, everything crypto.
All right, let's dive into a legal battle that's got the whole crypto world buzzing. The SEC versus Ripple Labs. It all comes down to one big question. Is Ripple's cryptocurrency XRP a security or not?
Yeah, and this case could have huge consequences for how crypto is regulated in the US. I mean, the judge even said there are strong arguments on both sides. So this deep dive is coming at just the right time.
Okay, so Ripple. They had this grand vision of revolutionizing global payments, right? They created XRP and the XRP ledger all the way back in 2012.
Exactly, the founders, Arthur Brito, Jed McCaleb, and Christian Larson. They were talking about building an internet of value, basically wanted to make moving money around the world as simple as sending an email.
Ambitious. And they generated 100 billion XRP to kick things off. 20 billion went to the founders and Ripple held on to 80 billion. Then Brad Garlinghouse takes over as CEO. They launch RippleNet and on-demand liquidity, or ODL.
Yeah, ODL is a great example of what Ripple was trying to achieve. It let users swap traditional currencies for XRP and then use that XRP to buy other currencies instantly. Imagine how much faster that could make international transactions.
I see the appeal for sure. But then bam, the SEC files a lawsuit in December 2020, claiming Ripple was selling XRP as unregistered securities. So what exactly was the SEC's main argument?
Well, they were pointing to the Securities Act of 1933. They said Ripple's sales of XRP were breaking U.S. law because they were unregistered securities offerings. And to determine if something is a security, they use this thing called the Howey test.
The Howey test. I've heard that term thrown around, but I always get a bit confused. Can you break it down for me?
Sure, it basically comes down to three things. First, there needs to be an investment of money. Second, a common enterprise, meaning the investors' fortunes are all tied together. And third, people buy the asset expecting to make a profit from the efforts of others.
Okay, so did Ripple just accept that?
Oh no, they fought back hard. They said XRP was more like a currency or a commodity. People use it for real-world transactions, not just speculation, so it shouldn't be under the SEC's control.
So we've got a real legal standoff here. And the SEC was particularly interested in three types of XRP sales, right? Institutional sales, programmatic sales, and other distributions.
Right. Institutional sales involved Ripple directly selling XRP to big institutions like hedge funds through formal contracts.
Okay, so those are the big players. What about programmatic sales?
Programmatic sales were a bit more under the radar. Ripple used algorithms to sell XRP on digital exchanges anonymously, kind of like automated trading, but for crypto.
Gotcha. And then there were the other distributions.
Other distributions covered any time Ripple used XRP as a form of payment, things like employee compensation or funding for projects.
So the judge had to decide if each of these types of sales counted as securities. What happened there?
This is where it gets interesting. The judge ruled that institutional sales were securities.
So how did Ripple slip up there? You'd think they'd want to be totally upfront about their plans for XRP.
Well, it turns out that backfired on them. The judge said those sales perfectly matched the Howey test criteria. Ripple's marketing emphasized XRP's investment potential tied to the company's success. And they even had rules about reselling XRP. It all made it look a lot like an investment.
Ah, I see. So sometimes transparency isn't the best strategy. What about the programmatic sales?
Now here's a twist. The judge ruled that those were not securities.
Wait, how is that possible? It's still XRP, right?
It is, but the key difference here was the anonymity. Buyers on exchanges didn't even know they were dealing with Ripple directly, so they couldn't be relying on Ripple's actions to make a profit. The judge determined that the overall market trends would drive XRP's price more than anything Ripple did.
So they flew under the radar and it actually worked in their favor.
You could say that. And with the other distributions, like paying employees with XRP, the judge sided with Ripple again. There simply wasn't any investment of money, which is a core part of that Howey test.
So the judge ruled in Ripple's favor on 2 out of the 3 types of sales. I'd imagine they'd be pretty happy with that outcome.
Well, not so fast. Remember Larson and Garlinghouse, the executives at Ripple. The SEC also accused them personally of helping Ripple break the law, and that part of the case is still going to trial.
Hold on, why is that going to trial? Didn't the judge make a clear decision on the other sales?
The issue here is whether Larson and Garlinghouse knew they were breaking the law. And that's not quite as clear-cut. Back then, the regulations around crypto were a lot less clear than they are now. Different countries even had different classifications for XRP.
So it's the classic, we didn't know it was wrong defense.
Exactly, and Ripple's also saying the SEC didn't warn them they were doing anything wrong, which ties into their due process argument. But the judge specifically said that only applies to the institutional sales, those direct contracts with sophisticated investors.
Man, this is getting complicated. So where do things stand now? Are we going to see this go to court?
That's the million-dollar question. A trial seems likely, but a settlement is always possible. The stakes are incredibly high for both sides. It'll be fascinating to see what happens next.
Okay, so we've got this legal battle going on, but I'm curious about the bigger picture here. What does this whole thing mean for the future of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, that's the question everyone's asking. This case has really shaken things up in the crypto world. But it could actually be a good thing in the long run.
A good thing. How so?
Well, for years, the crypto world has been like the Wild West. Very little regulation. The Ripple case is forcing everyone to finally deal with these legal questions. And that could bring some much-needed clarity and maturity to the industry.
So it's like finally setting some ground rules after letting everyone run wild for years.
Exactly. And while some crypto enthusiasts might not like the idea of regulation, I think a balanced approach is really crucial for the industry to grow and gain wider acceptance.
I see your point. But how do we find that balance? How do we
Yeah.
regulate without stifling all the innovation that makes crypto so exciting?
That's the challenge, isn't it? It requires both sides to come to the table and work together. The crypto industry needs to be more transparent and collaborate with regulators to set clear guidelines.
So it's not about crypto versus the SEC. It's about finding common ground.
Absolutely. The goal should be to create a system that protects investors without squashing the development of groundbreaking technologies.
That makes a lot of sense. But even if we do get clear regulations, there's still the issue of education. How do we equip everyday investors to make smart decisions in this complex landscape?
This is where initiatives like this deep dive are so important. We need to demystify crypto and give people the tools and knowledge they need to navigate this evolving landscape. I mean, if sophisticated institutions were struggling to figure out if XRP was a security, imagine how confusing it is for the average person.
It's like asking someone to perform brain surgery after watching a 5-minute YouTube tutorial.
Pretty much. And this case has also brought up some interesting questions about decentralization and how it relates to securities law. Ripple argued that XRP is decentralized, meaning no one entity controls it, which would make it different from traditional securities.
But the judge didn't buy that argument when it came to those institutional sales, right?
Right. In those cases, the judge focused on Ripple's direct influence on XRP's value and how investors were relying on Ripple's efforts for profit. The takeaway here is that simply calling something decentralized doesn't automatically make it exempt from securities laws.
So it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Not at all. This case could set some important precedents for how courts look at decentralization in the context of securities law. It might even encourage crypto developers to design their projects with regulations in mind from the very beginning.
Which could ultimately lead to a more mature and sustainable crypto industry. Speaking of regulation, the SEC chair has said that he considers most cryptocurrencies, other than Bitcoin, to be securities. Does this case have implications for Bitcoin and Ether?
It's definitely something people are thinking about. The judge's reasoning, focusing on the specifics of each sale and how much control a company has over its associated crypto, could be applied to other cases as well.
That's a worrying thought for a lot of crypto enthusiasts who see Bitcoin and Ether as fundamentally different from XRP.
No doubt, and the industry is watching closely to see if the SEC will be emboldened to take further action. It's a waiting game, but the implications could be huge.
So we've covered the impact on regulation, the challenges for everyday investors, and the potential implications for other cryptocurrencies. But what about Ripple itself? What does this case mean for their future?
Well, if they're found liable, they could be facing some hefty fines and restrictions on their operations. It could really limit their ability to achieve their goal of building this internet of value.
It's kind of sad to think about. Pouring your heart and soul into building something groundbreaking, only to have it potentially crippled by a lawsuit.
It's a tough situation for sure. This case highlights the risks businesses face when operating in an industry where the rules are constantly changing. But it also raises questions about the SEC's approach to regulation. Some people argue that their strategy of regulation by enforcement is unfair and actually stifles innovation.
So it's like trying to solve a puzzle by just throwing the pieces around and hoping they magically fall into place.
Exactly. This case might push lawmakers to create a clearer regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies, which would benefit both businesses and investors.
And maybe lead to a less adversarial relationship between the SEC and the crypto industry.
One can only hope. It's important to remember that this case has already had a huge impact, even before the trial has even begun. It has exposed the complex legal challenges around cryptocurrencies, sparked important conversations about regulation and investor protection, and forced us to rethink what a security even means in the digital age.
It's a case that keeps on giving, even before we get to the main event. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from the origins of Ripple and the Howey test, to the judge's rulings and the potential for a trial. But I keep coming back to one thought. What does this all mean for the future of cryptocurrency?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Ripple case has certainly thrown a wrench into the gears of the crypto industry, but in a way, it could be a blessing in disguise.
How so? You mean by forcing everyone to confront these legal issues head-on?
Exactly. For too long, the crypto world has operated in a Wild West atmosphere, with little regulatory oversight. This case has the potential to bring much-needed clarity and maturity to the industry.
It's like finally establishing some rules of the road after years of everyone driving wherever they want.
Precisely. And while some crypto purists may resist any form of regulation, I believe a balanced approach is essential for long-term growth and adoption.
But how do we strike that balance? How do we regulate without stifling the innovation that makes crypto so exciting?
That's where things get tricky. It requires collaboration, open dialogue, and a willingness to compromise from both sides. The crypto industry needs to embrace transparency and work with regulators to establish clear guidelines.
So it's not about crypto versus the SEC, but rather finding common ground.
Absolutely. The goal should be to create a regulatory framework that protects investors without hindering the development of potentially transformative technologies.
It's like building a bridge between the traditional financial world and the decentralized future of finance.
I love that. And this case could be the catalyst for that bridge-building process. Imagine a world where cryptocurrencies seamlessly integrate with existing financial systems, fostering financial inclusion and empowering individuals across the globe.
That's a future I can get behind. But even if we achieve regulatory clarity, there's still the challenge of education. How do we equip everyday people with the knowledge they need to make informed decisions in this complex space?
That's where initiatives like this deep dive come in. We need more resources, accessible explanations, and tools that demystify crypto and empower individuals to navigate this evolving landscape with confidence.
Because knowledge is power, especially when it comes to something as potentially revolutionary as crypto.
Couldn't agree more. And this knowledge shouldn't be confined to Wall Street or Silicon Valley. Everyone should have the opportunity to understand and potentially benefit from this technology.
So what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to ponder as they walk away from this deep dive?
The Ripple case is just one chapter in the ongoing saga of crypto and regulation. It's a reminder that this is an industry in constant flux, fraught with both opportunities and challenges. The way we navigate this uncharted territory will shape the future of finance for generations to come.
And that future is being written right now. It's up to all of us regulators, innovators, investors, and everyday individuals to participate in shaping it.
Well said. This deep dive has barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, discuss, and debate. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay tuned for more deep dives as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the crypto world.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. Until next time, keep those brain cells firing and remember, the future is decentralized. You know, throughout this whole deep dive, one thing's been bugging me. If even these big-time institutional investors had trouble figuring out if XRP was a security or not, what does that mean for the average person just trying to wrap their head around crypto?
That is such a good question, and it really underscores a crucial point. I mean, try to imagine making sense of all this without a whole team of lawyers and financial advisors. This case just shows how important it is to have clear, straightforward information about cryptocurrencies and where they stand legally.
Yeah, it's almost like we're asking people to make these huge financial decisions with hardly any guidance. As we wrap things up here, what are some of the key takeaways you hope listeners will walk away with?
Everything crypto.